Hello, everyone, and welcome to our decentralized future. We've got Andrew here today. Andrew and I have been talking quite a lot lately about all different things in the blockchain space. How are you, Andrew?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. So I imagine you may have heard of different big price drops this week, crypto going through all sorts of volatility, people getting very upset, accusations being thrown out everywhere. It's been very dramatic and distracting. But I actually really like something that you said in the Coinos Discord server earlier this week about how public price discussions are not really constructive. And I really like that because that's how I feel about a lot of stuff in the blockchain space. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit more?
Price is something that emerges out of markets. You've got one asset that has some kind of subjective value. You've got another asset that has some kind of subjective value, and you're trying to trade these for one another. And so markets enable you to do that in a trustworthy way, because I'm not just like taking your word for anything. We're working in some kind of third concept of price, typically the US dollar, especially if you're in the United States. And so part of my problem with the price discussion is that you're always talking about US dollars. You're always thinking about US dollars. And really what we're trying to do in the decentralized space is create alternative financial systems. Personally, I'm not an advocate for the idea that we're trying to replace existing financial systems, though over the long term, something like that might ultimately happen. I mean, I think over the long term, what I imagine happening is that existing financial systems integrate these powerful technologies to make themselves better, more open, more transparent, more democratic. And if they don't do that, I do think that they'll get replaced. But replacement isn't the objective. We're trying to create an alternative that is better and that forces other existing larger systems to integrate these technologies to deliver more value to people, to make people's lives better. And if you're talking about the price of an asset, what you're not talking about is value. And that's the problem that I have, because when you're building a decentralized product, a decentralized platform, what what you're trying to do is build a community that is working together to build something of value, and not just of value, but of ever increasing value, by which I mean that Koinos, when the mainnet launches, will have some utility to people. It will have some value to them. It will enable them to do something that they need to do. But a year after that, it should be even better. And 10 years after it, it should be way, way better, right? So we should always be thinking about how we can increase the value that this platform provides. And, maybe the price will reflect that, maybe it won't, but at the end of the day, we'll be adding value to the world, to people's lives. And that's really what matters to me. And I think my view, I think our view is that, yeah, price will probably be related to value, but it's actually an emergent property of value. And so if you're focusing on price, you're not focusing on what really matters.
Yeah, I think personally, I think the Tesla share price has kind of been a good example of this, in that if you think about when it was around like 300 or 200, there was lots of news articles coming out about how Teslas were terrible and people were exploding and, all that sort of stuff. And then, the price of those shares rocketed up really quickly within like a few months to 800, 1,000, whatever. But the fundamentals of the company hadn't changed. So the price of those shares weren't really relative to the value of that company, where everyone just looks at like, what is the price today? One thing I have noticed is people who work for blockchain or cryptocurrency companies just get constantly harassed about price. Like there's a Telegram group and everyone's just like, but what is the price going to be next week? What is the price going to be? And yeah, I think regardless of what you say, you're probably going to be harassed a lot on price by people who just want to make a quick dollar.
I fully expect that to happen. And that's why I'm trying to set the tone right and create almost like an immune response to this issue, whereby everybody knows that this isn't really something that we focus our attention on. I mean, I know for a fact that it's just not healthy. Yeah. I believe that to my core. Yeah. So that's going to be my position forever. And I really want to attract people to our project that share that belief. The other thing you brought up that I thought was interesting and bears a mention is, to me, I think the only time price becomes really relevant is when I see a dramatic disconnect between the price and my perceived value in the thing. And this is kind of what I always try to get at when people ask me about investment advice. People ask me, like questions like these. It's a very personal thing. When I saw Tesla shares at a low price, and I saw the value that I thought that they were going to deliver, I thought, oh, why am I holding these dollars when I can hold these Tesla shares? To me, that's the only time that price really becomes relevant. And a consequence of that is that I almost never sell. I really almost only ever buy. So for me, and again, this is something I tell pretty much everybody, but I don't know, it doesn't seem to land, or maybe I'm not explaining it right, is that I don't really think in terms of buying and selling. I think in terms of going in and out of different assets. And if I see a company that is doing better work in the domain of sustainable transport or sustainable energy, then I'm going to move my capital from Tesla into that company. I don't view it as, oh, I'm selling this, I'm taking my profits. This doesn't compute for me. I'm moving my capital into the place where it can do the most good.
Yeah, that actually, this is something that I wanted to ask you actually. Do you think Coinos will be more energy efficient than Bitcoin?
Yes. We don't like to make unequivocal statements about a product that hasn't been released yet, but on that, I can say absolutely yes. And I do fall into that camp where I don't necessarily think that the Bitcoin problem is as clear cut. It's not clean, but are we getting a lot of value from that that uncleanliness? Maybe, probably. Is it incentivizing some renewable energy? Maybe, probably. But environmental friendliness, while something that is certainly important to myself, is absolutely not a design constraint on Coinos. It's not one of our core principles, but efficiency is, and low cost of operation is. And if your network is consuming a large amount of expensive fuel, then that cost is ultimately going to get passed on to the user, which is going to minimize the impact of the platform, the growth potential of the platform, and our ability to accomplish our mission of accelerating the adoption of blockchain technology. And so for that reason, Coinos will be incredibly efficient, possibly more efficient than anything else we know of out there, because we have these vertical scaling solutions that'll keep the size of the blockchain small, because we won't be using a proof of work algorithm. And, but will it be on par with maybe proof of stake systems? Maybe. As far as the consensus algorithm goes, yeah, it'll probably be effectively the same. You're not using work. So we're both eliminating those. There are other problems that we see with the proof of stake model, which is why we're not implementing proof of stake. And that's why we like to say that our consensus algorithm has kind of the best of both worlds without the downsides. Where we're going to differentiate ourselves, we think, is definitely in the cost of running the node itself, and that should add that additional layer of affordability. But it's more a consequence of properly aligned incentives than about environmental friendliness. Because if everybody's incentives are aligned, that includes the user, and and those costs, any waste is going to get passed on to the user. And so we design this thing to minimize waste, and modular upgradability ensures that we can keep improving the platform and making it more efficient and more efficient over time. And that should result in environmental friendliness. Now, that being said, we're reducing these barriers to entry so that we can increase the level of adoption. And the consequence of that will be an incredibly high level of usage. And so maybe a couple of years down the line, we look at the network and we find, wow, the computers running this network are consuming a large amount of energy. That will probably be the case too. And who knows what energy sources will be powering that network. But this ties into our previous discussion. The real question is the value that you're getting from that network, and how much of that energy is being channeled into valuable human transactions and isn't being wasted.
Yeah, and I think that's something, like, you've seen a lot of the discussions about like the environmental friendliness of Bitcoin, and people countering like, yeah, but how much energy does the Visa, like not the network, but Visa the company use, or the current financial institutions, how much do they use? And so like it's really hard to measure that opportunity cost. So if the Coinos network is consuming a lot of power, but it is providing so much value, I don't think it will really come into question. But environmental friendliness is something that is important to me, and that sustainability, I think, is really important as well. So I think for me, like, I don't want to spend money on stuff that is not sustainable. So, you know, like, yeah, I like that you're concentrating more on efficiency rather than environmental friendliness, and hopefully it kind of ends up in the same spot. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I guess we'll see.
Well, here's an interesting thing that you might not know, and probably most people watching this probably don't know. But by learning it, I think it could put you leaps and bounds ahead of almost anybody out there. I think this is the most important economic factoid anyone can learn in their life, and it'll just immediately put them ahead of like 99% of economists, especially neoclassical economists, people like Paul Krugman, whatever, most of the economists that you know of. And that is that the single biggest thing that correlates to economic growth is energy consumption. And it's practically a correlation of one, meaning point at anything, any of the metrics that people usually point to for what's tied to economic growth. And we're talking about a correlation of, a good correlation would be 0.5.
Right.
One is perfect correlation. CO2 output is practically one. It's something like 0.96.
Right.
And so the reason that that's so important is because what we are doing as humans is using energy to create order out of chaos. The universe is trending towards entropy. That's dissolution. That's breaking up into noise.
Yeah.
We don't like noise. We like buildings, we like cars, we like things with order.
Yeah.
It takes energy to put those things, to take molecules and structure them into useful things. And so it's CO2 in the atmosphere doesn't have some magical property that increases GDP. It's not about the CO2.
Yeah.
It's about how we're generating energy. And the predominant way that we generate energy is by burning stuff. And so that's why CO2 and GDP are so closely interrelated. Personally, I believe this is why we should be just pumping money into solar energy. There's plenty of sunlight to fund this. And what we need to do. What we should basically be doing is saying, how much economic growth do we want over time? How much GDP do we need to pump into solar panels to generate that increasing rate of energy? And then we're good. That problem's like basically solved, but that's obviously not going to happen. Anyway, getting back to this question of value, um, another way to come at it is, are you using energy to create order out of chaos? Are you creating a product, a structured bunch of atoms that delivers incredible value to people's life? And so if you take a little bit of energy and you create a ton of order, that's exactly what we need to do. And the beauty of software is that it enables you to really create a ton of value from very little input. That's really the question here. And when we look at things like Bitcoin, the problem is that it clearly delivers incredible value and has a ton of potential. The problem with how it does that is that it uses something called proof of work to secure the network. Now, I believe, our team believes, that better systems can be implemented, systems that deliver the security and the value of Bitcoin without the wasteful work. But until that product is out, demonstrating that it delivers that, demonstrating that there is a way to do Bitcoin better, then Bitcoin will be this dominant digital asset.
Yeah.
So build something better.
Assuming there's also good marketing, right? Like, you know, we've seen in history where there's been a better product, but because it wasn't marketed as well, then it didn't really take off. You know, VHS versus beta, or you know, the original electric cars or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've got to get the word out, but that's not really what we're talking about here.
Well, marketing is more impactful when you're dealing in something that is more like a commodity. You know, I would really say that obviously marketing is a critical piece of business. There are three critical pieces to business. There's engineering, there's marketing, and then there's operations. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Every business, and you might swap out engineering for like labor or whatever, but it's like using your hands to build stuff.
Yeah.
So it's hugely important. It becomes more important when the differentiation between your product and another product is fairly minimal, the more minimal it is. When you're dealing in technology, the opportunity that you have is that by building something fundamentally different and better, you don't need as much marketing. You might not need marketing at all, because the unique value of your product is so incredible that it attracts organic interest, which enables you to bootstrap your business and your product and then start generating revenue. And of course, you take a percentage of your revenue and you pump it back into your product. But the problem is, the more innovative your product, the more new and different that it is, the more difficult it is to actually explain to people.
Yeah.
And really, marketing doesn't work very well at the beginning. Instead, what you need to be focusing on is your unique value proposition to your initial user base, which is going to be a small number of extremely passionate people who just like get the problem that you're trying to solve. Like for us, right? Feeless blockchain. You know, there are plenty of people who really, really want that. And we really don't need to market to those people. We just need to get something, right? Like you, right? We just need to tell you, this is what it is. This is how you'll be able to use it. And then we need to ship it. And then over time, of course, there will be a marketing budget. Personally, I'm a fan of that Steve Jobs philosophy of, sure, we'll spend a lot on marketing, but it'll be marketing that you never realize is marketing. You know, you'll never know it. As we start marketing more, it's not like you'll know it. That's the kind of marketing that I think is most effective and that I look forward to doing as this ecosystem grows.
Well, I mean, I think that's the big thing I learned, or have continue to learn with GFAM, is that I couldn't really market it. I basically had to build a community or tap into communities that already existed, and essentially like handhold individual people because it was so different to anything else that is around. Speaking of GFAM, one of the things that I struggled to get my head around initially with Coinos was I kept thinking of coin as a currency, which I guess coming back to our price discussion at the very start, I've got to kind of change that mindset. Even though technically it will be a currency, I can't think of it as a currency because it's really computing power. It's really like, the ability to unlock computation, I guess. And that's like that's been hard for me to get my head around. It is kind of a bit confusing.
You're right. It represents network capacity. Um, and yeah, it is funny how confusing that is. And I think a lot of that comes down to the massive disservice that so many projects in the space have done of trying to pretend like they're releasing something that has magical properties that will make their token just like replace the US dollar or become some global currency, because they were all trying to replicate, they're all trying to capitalize on the success of Bitcoin, which is a different thing. It was the first.
Yeah.
And that matters, and it works, and people are aware of it, and it has a ton of developer engagement, and it's application specific. Everything is so context specific in general, but you have to take that and apply it in Bitcoin's case as well. You can't just copy what happened with Bitcoin. And if I recall correctly from the white paper, it's not like they said, this is going to be a global currency. This is going to replace the US dollar. That came from people who read that into that platform. They were trying to create an online digital currency, or a digital currency for facilitating online commerce, and they failed. We still are getting, we still think that there's something useful that came out of that. Anyway, so a lot of people came out, and they're not those people who created that platform. And instead of saying, hey, we're building something that's going to be super useful to you, they just said, hey, this is going, as is so often the case, they just say some ridiculous statement about what they're going to be able to do, not how they're going to do it. Okay, we're going to cure cancer. We're going to be the currency of dentists, you know? And sadly, there are people who are willing to co-opt that narrative, whether sincerely or not, and promote it. And so it created this situation where left and right, you're hearing, these are currencies, these are monies, these are going to replace these other things. And I don't believe that that's how that happens anyway. We get a ton of value out of the US dollar. I can pay my taxes in it. I can buy stuff at the grocery store from it. You're going to have to deliver that kind of value in order to replace anything. And so with Koinos, what is the value that we're trying to create? Well, we're trying to ensure that if you hold coin, you can perform transactions for free. You can get a free account, you can execute smart contracts, and at no point are you losing the money on that transaction. And ultimately, what our system, the outcome of the system that we're implementing, the MANA system, which is effectively a market for network resources and opportunity costs of the user, is that if you hold a percentage of the liquid token supply, then you are entitled to use that percentage of network resources at any given time. So if you have some great use case for Koinos, then that is going to require, not in quotes, require, say 2% of network bandwidth, then yeah, you have to acquire 2% of coin in order to consume that. Now that's a very extreme scenario.
Yeah,
The odds
totally.
are not But hey, if you're getting that much usage, if you're getting that much adoption, then acquiring that much coin could theoretically become of worth to you. I mean, imagine somebody is starting a next generation bank on Koinos that becomes the biggest bank in the world. Well, holding 2% of the coin token supply might make perfect sense for that use case. And so, yeah, that is the purpose of this token. Now, it will be transferable in a few seconds. That determination hasn't been made yet. It will be feeless because everything on Koinos is feeless. So we'll have these properties that will make it incredibly valuable in commerce. But that's not the objective. We're not designing this whole system around pretending that we can be something we're not. We're designing the system entirely around this feeless capability and ensuring that the system can scale and can support great applications built around this core functionality.
Yeah, and I think originally when I like heard of Koinos and started like even mining coin, I was like, cool, I'm coming in early. Like I'm never early to these things. Like this is great. And that I guess that thought of like it might shoot up in price and then I can sell it and blah blah blah. And now that I've spent a bit of time with you and I've learned a lot more about the Koinos network, I will probably never sell it because I'll be able to either, put it into the bonds or lease out my computing power that I have, or I'll be using it for my own projects. I don't think there's a scenario where I'd be likely to sell it because I'll be using it. So yeah, that's a really different, I guess, concept that I think a few people kind of need to understand. And it's not easy because there isn't a lot that does something similar.
Yeah, hopefully there are going to be just an infinite variety of revenue generating and profit generating enterprises that you can participate in by holding your coin, and so you may never need to sell. Now that being said, we are creating this thing so that if that doesn't happen, you can always leave.
Right.
Because that's important for incentivizing everyone to make sure that those businesses and enterprises and opportunities are there. And that's why it was super important that the feeless transactional capability of Koinos come from the holding of the liquid token as opposed to staking of that token.
Yeah.
Which is how we implemented it on Steem, which is how they do it in Hive as well. Because what was super important to us was that the moment you buy coin, the moment it winds up in your wallet, you should be able to use Koinos. And that's what we mean by liquid coin. It's unstaked coin, in case anybody's not familiar with that. And so, yeah, that's why that was super important to us, because it not only creates the optimal user experience, but part of that user experience, or a kind of separate part, is the ability to leave ASAP.
Yeah.
Right? Because if it's liquid tokens that are giving you that capacity, and if you are not finding the things to do with that capacity, then you should be able to leave the moment you decide, the moment you realize that there's nothing of value there for you. And so having that capability conveyed through the holding of liquid tokens delivers on both of those requirements.
Yeah. I think with Hive and Steem, like they wanted to lock it in so that I couldn't upvote you and then you transfer all your Hive or Steem to me, and then then you could upvote me. So like that's totally understandable. But I guess with Koinos, that transfer of coin isn't a big deal because we're not upvoting each other. We're not trying to lock in that kind of stake. It's more like, oh, you need it, here you go. Oh, now I need it because I'm doing this, here I go. Which, could be really useful as it moves around the system. I think there might be a lot like that, especially if like, some companies are doing like a launch or something and they expect like, oh, we're going to have this peak of of interest or whatever, then they might need more just for that short amount of time. So yeah, I mean, that is really exciting.
Yeah, and you can still implement logic like there is on Steam and Hive
Yeah.
as a separate smart contract.
Yeah.
So over time with Steam, we wind up basically unwinding a lot of the stuff that led. So for example, the payouts got delayed and delayed. Originally, the idea was I upvote you, you get tokens. That was too gameable. So it got delayed. So if you were to implement that logic on Koinos, for example, you would just track all of the votes over time.
Yeah.
And then once you're confident that the votes and the people that they're going to are haven't been gamed and whatever, then the smart contract, and by we I mean the smart contracts. Once the logic is like, yeah, you know what, there's no gaming in here, it just blasts out all of the tokens. And now we're not involved in the system logic, the base currency. It allows for much more elegant solutions to those problems, and those there can be an infinite variety of implementations of that kind of logic, all borrowing from one another and improving on one another, and as iterating without the need for hard forks. So it allows for those same features, but we think in just far more powerful ways.
Yeah, I every time I talk to you, I just realize like, oh, I need to like get my head around smart contracts. I want to be able to write them. Like there is so much that we're going to be able to do. I just need to get smarter, just heap smarter.
Yeah, you and me both. It's hard enough just keeping up with what these guys are developing. And I try to temper expectations and things, but what I will say is just that the longer we keep working on this and the more we implement things, yeah, we discover that there are mistakes that we've made and time that's maybe been wasted on one or two things, and we kind of need to pivot. But at a high level, well, all those pivots wind up resulting in a better product, in better implementations, and the product is much better than we thought it was going to be when we started working on it. And I would say that not a month goes by that I don't think something has happened that'll make the product even better, because the team is just so good and so strong and has such great experience, and works together so well that as we encounter these problems, as we realize that we made a bad decision, it just results in us developing an even better solution that will deliver an even better developer and end user experience. And I'm actually really looking forward to talking about our solutions as we release the testnet, which is still on schedule. So it's coming soon.
Awesome.
And then as we make progress towards the mainnet, I'm really looking forward to updating everybody on our designs.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to taking a lot of the smart things that people say in the Discord and then trying to like figure out what they're actually talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to spend my time talking to my co-founders and blockchain architects and taking all of the smart things they say and figuring out how I can say it and take credit.
That last little line, that's the one that gets everyone all the time. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for this discussion, Andrew. I think there's a lot here, obviously. But yeah, there's so many different concepts that we really kind of need to get our heads around. Yeah, it's just really exciting what you're building and how I'm going to take advantage of that.
Well, thank you. That's what we're trying to do. We want you to use our expertise, you use our innovations and make money off of it and deliver great applications. One last thing I wanted to add is, we're calling this podcast Our Decentralized Future, and I think one of the things that I'm most proud of about Koinos isn't exactly the implementations and the problems that we're solving. It's that even if you don't use Koinos, by learning about it, it's such a great window into understanding decentralization, understanding blockchain technology, and understanding all of the other platforms that are out there. Because we do so much differently, because we're implementing things so differently, even if you don't like the way that we implement them, by learning about them, you also learn about the other ways that things are implemented. We talk about modular upgradability and how all of the system logic is implemented as smart contracts, smart contract modules, each of which is independently upgradable without a hard fork. So when you learn about that, you learn about hard forks. When you learn about how coin works and how mono works and how you can perform feeless transactions on a blockchain, you learn about how fees work on a blockchain. I think on a number of fronts, we're doing incredibly innovative work. And so when you learn about innovative solutions, you're also learning about the older solutions, the implementations that are already in place, often in more widely used protocols. And that is certainly an advantage of those protocols: more users, more developers. So you might ultimately go, you know what, I want to use Ethereum. I don't mind paying those fees right now. But it is very satisfying to us. And I think we're all more than happy with the result of, at least you learn more about blockchain, at least you got involved, at least you're using a blockchain. That's really all we care about.
And in truth, that's really why I was excited to jump in so early with Koinos. It wasn't honestly to make money off coin. It really was to get under the hood of blockchain, because obviously this is an area that I'm excited about, but I really don't know how a lot of it works. I know theoretically how things work. And so watching a team build a blockchain in pieces is really exciting for me to kind of comprehend how it all fits together.
That's the best way to learn about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I love hearing that. And it's funny, it's like that I think that's a big part of the reason why I started this company. It's definitely why I went to work at Steemit, because I was like, I want to see what it takes to build one of these from the inside. But as time went on at Steemit, I realized that I missed out on a huge portion of the knowledge that comes from creating the thing. And I always really regretted not having been there from the beginning and seeing what that process was like, because there's just so much information, and it's so amazing to be involved early on. And that's why I like the way that we're releasing the software with the developer preview. And we're really doing our best to enable community members to come along this journey with us as we produce this software, so that you can really learn it from the inside out. So that makes me super happy to hear, actually.
Awesome. Well, I'll have you know that I did get the developer preview working. It took me 25 minutes, and 20 of those minutes was downloading Docker. It was so once I had that under control, it was so easy. And thank you to your team that actually helped when I was struggling a little bit, and I was struggling more on how does Docker work than actually how to get Koinos up and running. So I have the Koinos blockchain able to run on my computer whenever I want it. So that's exciting.
That's great. And yeah, I think what we learned from your experience, and we definitely want as many people running the developer preview as possible, so that we can see when it doesn't work. It should be so easy that you're like, what the fuck is this? I think a lot of people started downloading and was like, what can I do with this? And it's like, you just ran it. That's great. It worked. That's good. If it doesn't work, tell us. And I think with you, what we learned is that people have this expectation that it's going to be so hard, and you're going to have to do all of these things that, we were just like, no, just download Docker, then do this, then do this. And we're so used to incredible complexity around this process of running a node that we have to do a better job of countering that. And of course, we can just be clearer and package the solution better. But so far, I'm super happy because, what you often wind up doing in software is you're iterating on your initial implementation, so so if it took an hour to set up at the beginning, we're going to be chopping minutes off of that over time. The fact that we're starting from a standpoint of, I did in 5 minutes. Your internet connection must be bad.
I know, so bad. Yeah.
That means that we're going to iterate on that, and we're going to get to the point where it's lower and lower and lower. And we only need to go from 5 minutes down to, say, 1 minute, and we're already learning what we need to do to enable, an even better experience in terms of running a node, because we really want it to be the case where if my mom decides, hey, what's this crazy blockchain crypto stuff, that she can literally just click on a button, download something and see it. Because the best way to understand something is to see it, like we were just discussing in terms of learning blockchain technology, being in the beginning, seeing it all unfold. It's the same thing with using. And so we really want to create that kind of user experience.
So the tagline for Koinos is, you can explain it to your mum.
Yes.
Great. That's all we ever wanted. My parents have never known what I do for an occupation ever.
Yeah. Now we can say, oh, this is what I do now. We've done this.
I press this one button. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. I hope you have a great week, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Same to you. Great
Bye.
chatting.